Sometime in the 2060s, across the vast desert expanses of mainland China, silos slide open in eerie unison. Within moments, the still night erupts as dozens of missile engines burst to life, their deafening roar shaking the earth for miles. The sheer force launching at once is so intense that the nearest city, 130 miles away, feels the tremors. Stunned citizens look to the skies watching, as the sky glows with an unnatural, terrifying dawn. Over 100 miles up into space, a constellation of American satellites silently watches, infrared sensors flaring to life, detecting the thermal plumes of rocket engines. One by one, the satellites go dark, fried by the batteries of ground-based lasers stationed across China and the People's Liberation Army-held Pacific Islands. At sea, Chinese air and space defense cruisers, at their own light-speed volleys, tracking and eliminating key targets. High above the clouds, PLA laser-armed aircraft join the onslaught, systematically destroying the American satellites. It's not easy work, though. The US has thousands of microsatellites in low Earth orbit. Cheap to build and launch, each satellite has less capability independently than a traditional military satellite. But when they're networked together, they can achieve the same effects. The secret to their success is their sheer numbers. Even with the Chinese culling a few thousand, enough remain in orbit to ensure continued American orbital operations. Deep within the Rocky Mountains, hidden beneath layers of reinforced concrete, American artificial intelligence awakens. It pours over petabytes of real-time data, pouring in from the U.S. Global Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Network, codenamed Hannibal after the great Carthaginian general who nearly destroyed the Roman Empire. It pulls in data not just from a network of low and high-orbit satellites, but from thousands of autonomous drone platforms in the air, in the sea, below the sea, and on the ground. Human operators add to the troves of data being sent to Hannibal, who, thanks to a global communications network, analyzes all of this information in real time. With tensions rising, America has added to its peacetime global network of ISR assets. The Pacific and Asian Southeast are saturated with automated drone platforms that all communicate with each other and back home to Hannibal. This has turned America's traditional system of kill chains into kill webs, far more resilient to enemy disruption and more responsive as well. In the age of artificial intelligence warfare, time is more valuable than entire squadrons of fighter aircraft or legions of tanks. Hannibal is a quantum computer of a scale large enough to do computations in fractions of a second that would require traditional computers millions of years to do. But Hannibal has a rival, the Chinese military artificial intelligence, codenamed Guanyu. The two supercomputers immediately begin a global electronic battle against one another across the entire realm of cyberspace. With the digital infrastructure permeating nearly every square inch of the planet and every aspect of day-to-day life, the two supercomputers are waging the first digital world war. The AIs target each nation's critical infrastructure, from water and power to communications. Simultaneously, they launch attacks on military and civilian networks, seeking to gain an edge by causing disruption and destruction. Even as Chinese missiles are reaching the upper atmosphere, the two superminds have devastated entire swaths of infrastructure, only to be rebuilt just as quickly by generative AI capabilities. The two are locked into a war of exploitation and sabotage, seeking out any vulnerability in digital security and exploiting it. Just as quickly as vulnerabilities are found and exploited, though, the two AIs build brand new code from scratch to patch up and strengthen against future attacks, while simultaneously undoing the harm the digital attack caused. It's a battle raging at the speed of light across global communications networks. To the casual observer, it's only noticeable as a brief dimming of lights as their nation's power grid and digital infrastructure is attacked, and then just as quickly rebuilt by friendly AI. From Hannibal and Guanyu's point of view, however, it's like Europe suffering the devastation from World War I and then being rebuilt several million times a second. Over the course of quintillions and quintillions of cycles, one of the two AIs will eventually emerge dominant over the other. It's a process that in the real world may take no more than a few minutes. But even as Hannibal is waging a global digital war, it's also coordinating a military response to the Chinese missile attack. The missiles are only now beginning to reach the upper layers of the atmosphere. American missile defense satellites, inserted into orbit in anticipation of hostilities, open fire on the missiles from right above them. They fire potent lasers targeting the bodies of the missiles, causing uneven heating and damage to the body. The missiles begin to tumble out of control, with aerodynamic forces ripping them apart. The satellites themselves, however, are immediately targeted in return by airspace defense batteries on the ground. All of the targeting, from the American missile defense satellites to the Chinese airspace defense laser batteries, is being done automatically, with no input from human controllers. AI is fully in control, because humans simply cannot think fast enough. The missiles, however, have now entered into space, leaving behind their most vulnerable launch phase. As they glide through the vacuum of space, each warhead bus separates from its booster, firing secondary engines to accelerate to several thousand miles per hour. Out in the Pacific, American destroyers fire a volley of SM-9 space defense missiles, targeting their booster vehicles. This new generation of missiles specializes in knocking out enemy vehicles and missiles in low Earth orbit, and features a booster rocket capable of achieving hypersonic speeds. The missile body itself is built from a new generation of metamaterials capable of withstanding extreme heating caused by hypervelocities within the atmosphere, and contains no warhead. Instead, once the missile reaches space, the missiles detach their primary boosters, igniting a second-stage engine. Traveling at hypersonic speeds, they close in on their targets with deadly precision, slamming directly into the Chinese delivery vehicles and destroying them. The Chinese missiles, however, are already separating from their delivery vehicles and dispensing countermeasures like chaff and dummy missiles. Hannibal analyzes the telemetry, thermal signatures, and movement patterns of thousands of objects, some real warheads, others decoys or harmless debris. The AI's mission is clear: separate the lethal threats from the distractions before it's too late. Calculations are made in mere milliseconds. Hannibal transmits precise targeting instructions to the SM-9 interceptors, each missile receiving its own designated kill target. It's become a numbers game. Despite its orbital missile defense architecture, along with its Aegis-equipped ballistic missile defense ships in the Pacific, the US is simply overwhelmed. Over 100 missiles are now hurtling down from space and toward the American mainland. The missiles are not nuclear-armed, but they don't need to be. Historically, the United States' greatest advantage was being protected by two massive oceans. Thanks to modern missile technology, China can target American ports, factories, and commercial centers critical to the war effort with conventional missiles from half a world away. In response, the U.S. missile shield includes not just space and sea-based assets, but Patriot missile defense batteries spread out across the continental U.S. Due to the increased threat of conventional missile attack, the U.S. Space Force has assumed the role of missile defense. It now operates missile defense sites spread across the U.S. Over a century ago, during the Cold War, the U.S. stationed Nike missile defense batteries across America, even right next to civilian neighborhoods. In 2050, the U.S. had begun construction of new missile defenses throughout the nation in a mirror to its early Cold War efforts. All across America, Patriot batteries fire interceptors into the sky. Over 100 Chinese hypersonic missiles are descending on the U.S., with a new wave of attacks by the People's Liberation Army rocket force just minutes away. The Chinese missiles aren't just hypersonic, though. They can also maneuver to complicate enemy missile defenses and avoid predictable paths to their targets. Hannibal is in full control of over 300 interceptors, themselves also highly maneuverable, as they surge toward their targets. Bright flashes of light are the only clue the observer on the ground has that an intercept was successful. Devastating explosions on the ground denote each failure. All across America, critical infrastructure and military targets are destroyed by the hypersonic strikes. In exactly 8 minutes, a second wave of Chinese missile attacks will descend upon the U.S., stretching even America's vast arsenal of interceptor missiles to its limits. A third wave will follow, but the fourth will never get the chance to launch, neutralized before liftoff by squadrons of American hypersonic drone bombers. In retaliation, the U.S. is also launching crippling attacks using long-range hypersonic missiles against China. Chinese missile defenses are not as sophisticated, though. Guan Yu is not as capable as Hannibal, resulting in the destruction favoring the U.S. This still leaves hundreds of factories, power plants, airfields, and military barracks across America nothing more than smoking wreckage. The missile attacks last less than half an hour. That's how long it takes for both nations to fully exhaust their inventory of long-range hypersonic missiles. Over $4 trillion worth of weapons acquired over the last 20 years, fully expended in less than half an hour. But World War III is just starting. The Abrams tank's onboard AI automatically highlighted enemy infantry for the crew. The augmented reality goggles painted the enemy in faint red figures, detected by the tank's infrared cameras. For the 3 crew members, looking through their goggles was like looking through the thick armor of the tank's body. The tank's AI created a composite picture of the outside of the tank by merging together data from 12 different cameras, 4 infrared sensors, and 2 small radar arrays. It even projected a known or estimated distance onto the enemy figures, along with the suggested means of engagement. In this case, the AI was recommending engaging with the remote machine gun weapon station. Normally, it would recommend the coaxial autocannon, but the threat was deemed insufficient. Instead, the AI recognized it was more strategically advantageous to keep the main gun pointed down the row of wrecked houses, where an enemy tank could appear at any moment. With a verbal confirmation, the AI was set to weapons free and took over the remote weapon station automatically to fire on the enemy soldiers. They were walking through thick cover, and so the firing was sporadic, the AI being conservative with its firing to increase accuracy and conserve ammo. And then two things happened simultaneously to put the tank and its crew in the middle of their worst nightmare. They were too far to detect it visually, but the tank's radar picked up the signature of incoming drones. The enemy troops had put a drone swarm into the air, a tanker's nightmare. Perhaps the only sound more dreaded in the chaos of battle was that unmistakable pop, the launch motor of a guided anti-tank missile kicking clear of its tube, followed by the brief roar of its main rocket igniting. The crew could hear all of this thanks to the augmented acoustic software powered by onboard AI. The AI filtered outdoor audio picked up by microphones all around the tank, dulling the sound of friendly tanks and other atmospheric noises. It also selectively augmented specific sounds for the crew's benefit, like the buzzing sound of the drone swarm's blades and the double pop sound of an anti-tank missile being fired. Even before the crew could react, the AI was at work. The American tanks were serving as a spearhead for a column of infantry fighting vehicles, an indivisible AI network connecting them. In a normal situation, the battlefield AI system would suggest or even automatically select the best countermeasure for a situation. When dealing with threats such as drone swarms or anti-tank missiles, though, the AIs were set to full free fire mode. To deal with the anti-tank missile, America's AI selected the active protection system from an accompanying tank that had a better angle on the threat, firing an explosive projectile in an intercepting trajectory to the incoming missile. The missile was no ordinary threat. It was a smart weapon. Using side-facing boosters to make abrupt course corrections, it attempted to outmaneuver American defenses. Just as it neared the vulnerable top armor of the lead tank, a second explosive interceptor struck it mid-air. The programmable projectile detonated in a calculated pattern designed for maximum interception effectiveness while minimizing collateral damage, ensuring that any nearby friendly infantry remained unharmed in the blast. The position of the anti-tank crew that had fired the missile was estimated via tracking the missile's course in reverse with the tank's onboard radars. It was directly on the other side of a small building out of the line of sight, but it was marked on the tanker's augmented reality goggles. The same Abrams that had been chosen to fire the intercepting projectile now fired a programmable round from its main cannon, smashing through the front and rear wall of the building and exploding a millisecond after piercing the second wall. The enemy tank was shredded with shrapnel. But the drone swarm was a different threat altogether, and already enemy drones were descending in high-speed attack runs. Normally, American tanks would be covered by specially modified Lynx infantry fighting vehicles. Each armor company was accompanied by two anti-drone armored platforms, with modified Lynx infantry fighting vehicles packing key weapon systems to take out drones. This would include onboard long-range laser cannons, autocannons, and even anti-drone drones. These were rugged, high-speed AI-powered drones built to physically ram enemy drones and keep flying. With reinforced frames and adaptive maneuvering, each one could take out 2 or 3 targets before sustaining enough damage to be rendered inoperable. The sheer number of drones in the theater of war had meant that both sides' anti-drone platforms had suffered extreme attrition. Instead, the American tanks would have to rely on their own drone defenses, along with a few modified Allied infantry fighting vehicles, or IFVs. Carrying similar anti-drone defenses as their American counterparts, they were technically capable of handling the threat, at least on paper. However, their AI lagged behind US systems, making them slower to react and less adaptive in a rapidly evolving battlefield. The lead Abrams' 4th weapon station, a ring-mounted laser defense system, went to work on the enemy drones. The laser fired in short 1.5-second bursts, and typically took 2 to 3 bursts to down a drone. The American AI coordinated between available tanks to engage the drone swarm. As the Allies' anti-drone IFVs opened fire with programmable explosive 30mm cannon rounds that created a wall of shrapnel for the drones to fly through. Drone after drone fell from the sky under the intense defensive assault, but then came the unmistakable roar of armored vehicles. The enemy were fighting a combined arms battle, putting pressure on the American-led formation with drones, anti-tank missile systems, and now the armored fist joined the fight. The enemy's lead tank opened fire even before clearing the row of buildings it had been hiding behind a half-mile away. Clearly, they had their own remote surveillance, likely a drone up in the sky. In actuality, they were making use of ground-based swarming drones no larger than a mouse, who operated by saturating an area and laying largely unnoticed along the ground. They were often mistaken for debris until they became active and started broadcasting. The sky was no longer safe for drones. With a 144mm cannon, the enemy tank could fire through even a thick concrete wall and still pose a serious threat to the lead Abrams. The onboard AI calculated the speed of the incoming round and determined it posed a lethal threat to the Abrams. It rapidly fired off its active protection measure. The defensive explosive round detonated a fraction of a second before the enemy round struck home. It was deflected enough to cause it to tumble and create a deep furrow along the sloping front armor. The lead Abrams was already firing back even as his automatic grenade dispensers chucked out smoke grenades capable of blocking out infrared detection. That didn't matter though, because the enemy were homing their fire in based off of data fed to them from their network of distributed drones. Using onboard seismometers along with passive sensors, the drones could network to each other and create a detection net. This would relay targeting information to friendly forces on the position, speed, and direction of travel of any vehicle within their formation. The drones were crushed by the hundreds as the Americans and their allies maneuvered their vehicles through the urban battlefield. But that didn't matter much for the sensor network. Thousands of drones had been distributed via artillery days ago, using onboard batteries to move into positions and disperse themselves efficiently. They even had photoreceptive exteriors to recharge batteries by simply laying out in the sun. After the battle was done, they could be ordered to rendezvous in one location for pickup and reuse. Under assault from the air and the ground, the American formation was forced back, the lead Abrams going up in flames as a combination of drones and enemy tank rounds hit home. The Allied vehicles had already disgorged their complement of infantry, who quickly ran into cover along the shattered remains of the city. They carried integrated U.S. technology, allowing them to seamlessly network with American weapon systems. As the battle escalated, a swarm of their own loitering munitions entered the fray, ready to hunt down and destroy enemy targets with precision. Using a laser designator, an Allied soldier marked the area of the battlefield occupied by enemy troops and vehicles, and the loitering drones took over from there. The advanced Switchblade 1200 drones networked with the Abrams AI to build a battlefield picture, as well as an orbiting MQ-38 stealth drone providing overwatch for this part of the city. All of the American troops wore a small sensor on their bodies that provided identification for U.S. smart weapons, much in the same way aircraft used to identify friend or foe systems. The sensors were worn directly on the skin and operated by regularly testing the sweat from a soldier to ensure their DNA matched with computer records. Thus, one couldn't be recovered by the enemy to fool U.S. battlefield networks. The Allies had been given their own friend tags, as the troops had come to call them. Thus, the loitering drone swarm knew which targets below were friendly and which weren't. As the automated drones approached the kill zone, they hugged the ground to avoid interception and detection. They effortlessly moved through buildings via open doors and windows in a swarm over 100 strong. Individually, they were limited, but working together in a swarm, they increased their total intelligence. This allowed the swarm to move with extreme precision in even dense urban terrain, and even choosing optimal concealment routes to their targets. The enemy were completely surprised by the sudden emergence of dozens of lethal drones popping out of everything, from storm drains to ground-level bedroom windows. Their own anti-drone defenses used a mix of laser fire, anti-drone drones, and shotgun-like autocannon rounds. But in the tight confines of the ambush, their effect was limited. The drones were smart enough to independently target anti-drone platforms first, then went to work on targets by level of threat. Tanks first, IFVs second, and individual soldiers third. As the swarm thinned out, it became dumber, less effective at maneuvering, and less intelligent in picking targets. The battle had lasted less than 20 minutes and both sides had lost half of their armored vehicles, with only 6 total lost to tank-on-tank fire. The rest had all been destroyed either by anti-tank missiles or drones. As was rapidly becoming the norm, the armored vehicles quickly pulled out of the ruins of the city, leaving infantry behind to hold ground. American infantry dug into positions along a destroyed row of industrial buildings, quickly deploying their own drone defenses. Resembling miniature versions of full-sized machine guns, the anti-drone guns were fully automatic and set up in key positions to defend from enemy drones. They fired shotgun shells at a rapid rate, filling the sky with the equivalent of birdshot. Electronic jammers were also distributed at key positions along the American defenses, but these were less and less effective every year. More and more drones were becoming fully autonomous, despite global agreements warning of the dangers posed by AI-driven weapons. But in the end, the brutal reality of warfare prevailed. Any side that refused to deploy them would become completely outmatched by an enemy that did. At the very least, the jammers would limit a hostile drone swarm's ability to communicate with itself and relay data back to a command post. The Americans were in position no more than an hour before they were under attack. It was a soldier's worst nightmare, plaguing the imagination of infantrymen for nearly 40 years now. The distinct buzz of a drone's rotors, only loud enough to sound as if a buzzsaw was sawing the world in half. Dozens of miniature drones the size of an average bird came whirring down the rubble-strewn streets straight at the American position. The drone guns began firing automatically, soldiers equipped with shotguns adding to the defensive fire. They were supposed to be under constant cover from anti-drone vehicles, either Lynx fighting vehicles or autonomous anti-drone drones equipped with 4 laser cannons each. They were supposed to hover 20 to 30 feet above the troops, automatically tracking and neutralizing incoming threats. Without these protections, the soldiers were forced to rely on their own automatic drone guns and jammers, along with a smattering of shotguns and their own rifles. The drones proved too agile and small, however. Even if striking dead center at an armored vest, the small explosive charge at the very tip of each drone could push a titanium plug straight through the ceramic armor, causing massive trauma to the chest cavity. The drones would leave no survivors, and the next day the Americans would retaliate by unleashing their own larger drone swarm. Like plagues of locusts, the anti-personnel drones swarmed through entire neighborhoods, seeking out unprotected soldiers and armored vehicles. As the war dragged on, drones increasingly became the weapon of choice, cheaper and faster to produce than armored vehicles. Drone swarms powered by AI quickly became capable of scouring entire swaths of battlefields of all enemy combatants. What do you think the future of warfare will look like? Will AI-powered drones and autonomous weapons dominate the battlefield? Or will traditional strategies still play a crucial role? Drop your thoughts below. Now go check out how things have changed in 2 years with our take on how war will be fought in 50 years from 2023. Or click on this other video instead.